Fun.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to my new show, Out of Nowhere. It's a brand new show. We have lots of different topics on my show, from psychic mediums, Bigfoot, werewolves, lots of different things, near death experience. And we'll be talking about that tonight on the show with my special guest, Jacob Cooper is passionate about promoting healing. Jacob is a best-selling author of Life After Breath and The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. He's a sought-after speaker on grief, wisdom, consciousness, offering meditation, mindfulness at seminars to help others find their purpose and overcome their fears of life after death. Can we please welcome Jacob to the show? Hello there.
Hey, Bob. Thank you for having me back on. It's a great opportunity and an honor to be here with you today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I've been wanting to get you on for a while. Before we delve into your work and near death experience, tell us, the listeners, about what happens to you when you are growing up.
What happened to me personally when I was growing
Yes,
up? Oh,
yeah,
yeah, I had certainly it was very complex, because most kids, you're kind of taught to move away from your spiritual identity and self and to really be programmed into this human experience. So there's a degree of abandonment of who you are and what you know deep within. And most kids at around 5 or 6 years old, forget, themselves, their past lives, where they come from a lot of times, and they just kind of inherit the new sense of belief systems. Where for myself, it was a lot more complicated because that trajectory of influence and programming was altered with the profound near-death experience that I had at the young age of 3 years old, which certainly put my life in a whole new direction, and it's allowed me to do the work that I do today. Everything I do is really to give back to that experience and to give over what I experienced to other people in their many walks of life.
I know you were just telling me briefly what you do at the hospital with people having difficulties in their life.
Yeah, well, I take it even further than that, Bob. I Right now, what I've been doing is I've been training other therapists like myself to help understand, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, mediumistic experiences, so that they're not sent back really to where I work, but we're really able to help them, not to suppress or repress their gifts. And so you just kind of wondered how many potential uh, mediums, spiritual teachers who might have been misdiagnosed as some of having some type of psychotic condition versus something that might have been more of a psychic condition. And so I help to really clarify that perspective so that we could really help our clients to make sense of their experiences and their gifts, not to push them away and deny who they are and what they're connected to.
Do I think it's a fine line, like being a psychic medium where you hear voices and people have ear voices but react in different ways?
Yeah, well, it's anything like else. I mean, it's hard to say, like, are you having a psychotic episode because you're having that reaction or because it's actually, something, that is of a psychotic nature. And so that's the positionality to be in. But yes, there is such a case as obviously schizophrenia, which is, different than psychic experiences, and it's rooted in normally a lot of dark type of energy and just these voices telling you to do all these terrible things. So that could be quite dangerous if left untreated. So that's something different, but there's still a pathway to healing and to living with that. So there's solutions. There's a lot of solutions with any given problem within the mental health field. But yes, the psychic phenomenon is, something that's more of a guided force, something that's more of a healing force, something that's more of a GPS of your life to steer you in the right direction, not make things worse.
Um, what did you remember after your near death experience?
Well, for one thing, we are certainly not all that we see ourselves as. I often start my workshops with just asking how people see themselves as, and oftentimes I'll point to the body and I'll say, well, if that goes, then who are you? What are you connected to? And many times they just don't know, which is a big barrier for people to understand the unseen forces of life because of all that is in this reality and physical. I can understand there's a big barrier with understanding these forces that we're not able to see with our physical eyes or hear with our physical senses and experience that. But certainly, we're a lot more than what we think. We're connected to certainly a life of purpose, a life of meaning, and a divine guided life. This isn't just a random existence to pay the bills, to get retirement, and that's kind of it. We're here as spiritual beings having a human experience, and that's certainly something I took away, is that I remembered myself as a spiritual being connected to my own guardian angels, spirit guides, you might call them in some cultures. I was aware of angels that I saw all around me. I had awareness of all of the piece of creation, or as many people call it, God itself. So it was quite profound, but it's just like all these things are around all of us at all times. We sometimes just have our human blinders on and forget the beauty, um, that we are around, I would say, because we just have our human stuff taking over all these things that are around us.
Hmm. Very interesting. I know you specialize in past life regression. What have you learned from that?
A whole lot of material. What got me interested in the field of past life regression is, as a child, I would have past life memories of what I experienced in my near death experience. And sometimes these were a little bit distressing and I just wanted to kind of live my life, but these memories would flood my mind. But to me, much like the near death experience, I just know there's so much of our reality that we're not aware of within our conscious mind or our brains. And so there's a higher reality that we could connect to. Some might call it the subconscious, the superconscious, whatever you might label that as. So we're mostly governed by our lives by a very small percentage of our awareness. And so when you're able to really tap into past lives, it helps you understanding, who you were before you got here, some of your greater purpose, but at the very least, the clear notion that we don't die, because when clients are regressed in past life regressions, they see themselves as physically dead, but they go on. Oftentimes it comes with a life review and they're able to have a full, crossing over experience in the life between lives as we know it. Um, but for instance, what I found with my clients is scientific paradigm says if you look at anything closely enough, there's an explanation. And a lot of clients who come in for therapy, they might have certain, let's say, phobias or fears or tendencies that are just not explained logically at all within this lifetime. And so that could be a component of past life regression where we're able to go to the point of origin behind maybe something that is stuck or just kind of influencing this life that has nothing to do with this particular lifetime. But it's not all just negative or pathologized. There could also be a lot of healing components and the capacity for someone to maybe remember some of their gifts that they had in other lifetimes that they can incorporate in this lifetime too. So yeah, to understand a book, it's helpful to understand the prior chapters, sometimes. So that could help us understand ourselves a little bit more on a whole level.
I know. So, what happens fully when you cross over then?
Well, for one thing, I didn't experience fire and brimstone and a wrath in my near-death experience. I know there's a lot of near-death experiencers who discuss hell or hellish near-death experience or having a
Mm.
distressful near-death experience. I hypothesize that you know those experiences did not have full crossing over components to them. I suspect that they were more so in that incubation period between here and there, and they didn't fully cross over into the light. Because once you're in the light, there's no room for darkness or distress. It's pure joy, it's pure bliss, it's pure euphoria that goes beyond anything that we could possibly understand and compare within this reality. So I understand that when you do cross over, you go to the light realm. There are certainly different levels of it, but as you vibrate higher within each lifetime, you're able to really see more and go higher on the other side. Um, Kind of like an apartment complex where maybe you're on the first or second floor, you could only see so much, but then you go to the 10th or 15th floor, you have a greater canvas of the ultimate reality. And as we, evolve throughout lifetimes, our awareness tends to grow, and thus we could, you know, ascend to different levels of the other side. But no matter where you are on the other side, it's loving, it's healing, it's nurturing. You're with your spirit guides, your soul family, angels, God, and it's a beautiful, wonderful place for all to be in. Although it can be, I would say, the one painful component is a life review, which you know the most important thing I think for people to really understand is the me consciousness versus the we consciousness. When you're living in me consciousness, you're unaware of causality and effect of your own actions, and it's all about you. So you do anything you can to get ahead while putting everyone, down along the way. And so when you live in this lifetime, congruently with spiritual truths, that's in the state of the we consciousness, where you understand that life is not outside yourself, and you're able to see the interconnected mosaic of all of life. And we're able to live there. How you live is how you'll die often. And so you'll be able to have an easier life review, and not as painful and more rewarding when you watch that film of your life and how it affects your surroundings. So having integrity, awareness, and acting in the highest possible way helps us, when we review our lives.
I think there's a question from Diane. Jacob, when we pass over, do we have a choice? And if we don't, if we don't want to come back here,
Yeah. Well, there's, I would say the vast, probably a larger percentage of near-death experiencers are told, hey, it's not your time. For myself, so I was given autonomy that I was said, hey, you could stay or you can go. What I will say, and this goes congruently with a lot of my colleagues who do the life in between life hypnosis sessions, such as a man named Rob Schwartz. If you don't know of Rob, do check out his work. But I agree with my own experience, within my near death experience in hypnosis, that there is nothing that you will do that your higher self doesn't fully agree with. So let's say you really are in disagreement with every fiber of your being to not go, your guides and angels will be able to really acknowledge that, and thus you'll be able to stay. But there's an encouragement or a pushing through a higher intelligence, and sometimes that comes through resistance. But then when there's a full blown resistance, your guides will notice that, and they won't really force you to do anything that for yourself goes against your every fiber.
so if you don't want to cross over, like some people get stuck in time,
Hmm.
like a ghost, or want to go over but don't want to go over, and they're stuck there until somebody says helps them to go over.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I think we're talking about kind of earthbound spirits, kind of trapped spirits. Yeah.
Hmm.
Spirit could encourage you at a certain way, but yeah, you're right. There is always autonomy when you're over here and over there as to what you want to do. There could be encouragement of, things to do. But no matter what, we could have a stubborn part of ourselves where we could just kind of stay in that place. And that's the beauty of life, is the freedom element that we do have, the ability to choose, despite encouragement or suggestions for maybe a different path to take from an intelligence that goes far beyond our own. And
When you pass
it's
over,
yeah.
yeah, when you pass over, can you see yourself in another reality then?
Well, you certainly do see reality in a much different way. You see yourself in your life in a lot more of a broader perspective. I think a lot of people, when they live this life, they have kind of their box on, and that's their centerpiece of reality. But when you do cross over, I think the first thing that people remember is wow, we are all spiritual beings. And oftentimes, I don't know if some listeners could agree with this, but I've had readings where I've had loved ones who didn't believe in any of this stuff. And they come through specifically in the readings and said, Jacob, I understand what you were talking about all these years. You're not, one flew over the cuckoo's nest. You
Yeah.
made sense of what you're saying from the biggest skeptics, agnostics, or deniers of this stuff that I know of. So, just because you don't believe it here does not mean you're not going to be a believer at some point. But I don't think it's about belief. I think within each of our core of our awareness lies memory, but sometimes that, is covered up with our own human stuff.
Some people are frightened of dying. What advice would you give them?
Say that some people are afraid of dying is a question.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's it's a logical perspective to have on one level. I mean, for instance, fear of the unknown is one of the greatest fears that we have, and death in general is certainly a top five death that one can have. Um, in my career and line of work, I challenge myself to expose myself to the two of the top biggest fears, which is public speaking and death.
Ah,
And so, what I would suggest to viewers is the value of not running away from it, but to address it. That's the only way that we're able to really progress through a fear. And the way out is through it, not away from it, but through it and gradually. So, the concept of just talking about it, thinking about it, but beyond that, recognizing, do we just want to vent our fears, or do we want to maybe be open to another perspective towards things? And if you're able to do that, you could look at the hard studies, research, and evidential data that has really been collected throughout the years through different anecdotal encounters, such as myself, near death experiencers, or evidential mediumship, that would really increase the case of life after death for yourself. But we all have to have a courtroom of the afterlife, and we all have to really make sense of evidential data as it fits our worldviews and come up with their own conclusive belief systems based off of what is presented. But I think the first things first is to normalize that fear. The second phase is really to see if that is something that we want to have continuity of, or we want maybe to look at it in a different way. Uh, death remains the same, but in some cultures, some people could have celebratory elements to it. They could laugh, they could have music, they could party on. And I think there's a cultural element that certainly can influence that piece too. Um, where in death, you many times focus on how the person died and not how they lived. So I think the important thing is to focus on life itself rather than how the person left, how the person lived while they were here. But to really gather your own information that goes beyond just your own thoughts and maybe what you were provided within your own cultural upbringing or religious upbringing.
yeah. Let's talk about your book, Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah.
Start with Life After Breath. What's all that about?
Well, Life After Breath is really a homage to the title of Life After Life by Dr. Raymond Moody, who's a good friend of mine. He coined the term near-death experiences in the mid 70s and was very certainly pioneering and daring in what he was able to really bring out to the world. Because near-death experiences have been around for thousands of years, but Raymond, to come from an academic background and a medical background, to bring them out within his book was certainly groundbreaking, and he coined the term near-death experiences within that book, as did he also coin the term shared death experiences, which maybe we could get into in a little bit. But life after breath really comes from the notion that I suffocated in my near death experience. I lost all capacity to function, to breathe. And it was the most, I don't want to sugarcoat, the physical dying process that, no one's immunized from that. But what I could say is from going through the most abyss of the human experiences, there is a beautiful light and a beautiful feeling that you have when you do cross over. And pain is a temporary condition, but it does not last, as does any storm. And so for me, life after breath is a notion that, hey, We could lose our own breath within this life, but what saved my life was a power of surrendering to this breath of eternity, which, like I say, in my religion, Judaism, the word for spirit is called the wind of God or the breath of God.
Ah,
And that's what we are created from. And so, even if we do lose our own physical breath and our body goes, we are able to surrender to the breath of creation, the breath of eternity, and that breath is eternal. And so, life after breath was just a homage to Raymond, but also a clear evidential reference to when you suffocate physically or metaphorically, life will continue. And so, no matter what you're going through, even if you technically physically die, you will be okay. And in the grand scheme of things, all is well, was well, will be well, despite some temporary turbulence that you may feel.
hmm. Very interesting. Very interesting. I bet it was interesting doing the research into it and finding more things out about it and about yourself as well.
Mm. Oh, yeah. I always say many heads are better than one head. And so, when you're able to just kind of, and some stuff for seekers may make sense, some may not, but we could all certainly learn from each other. I think we're in a very dismissive culture where if you're not totally alignment with something or someone, you will disalign every single little thing that that person has to say. And we have to get part to the fact that we could all be students of every person, of what to do, what not to do, and it doesn't always have to be black and white, where if it's one person on a totally different spectrum, you can't find things that you could and find in common with that person. But one thing I've found in common denominators within the human experience is pain, to a degree, where that pain is universal, grief in itself is universal. So if we could align on those things, we could have a lot more doorways of compassion, empathy, and unity consciousness versus being very fragmented, indivisive, as we've seen on the global stage.
Tell us about the wisdom of Jacob's ladder.
Yeah. Well, Life After Breath, first of all, is more of a memoir towards my near-death experience and life after that, and how I was able to make sense of it all, and some of the highs and lows that came with having a childhood near-death experience, which was very, very challenging. So a lot of people found a lot of inspiration from that book, and I get emails from people all the time where said, "Wow, I could identify with so much of what you're saying. It made sense. It was so clear. I thought that was me this whole time." And that's because there's a universality of all of our experiences. And life isn't about you; it's about others, and we're interconnected. So, as I said before, we have a lot more in common than we do differences when we boil it down. But the wisdom of Jacob's ladder was again another homage to biblical Jacob, who was in Genesis, if you're familiar with it, was fleeing from his brother Esau, who was jealous with the covenant, and Jacob was fleeing for his life, and he, put his head on a bed of rocks, and he had a dream of angels going up and down the ladder when death was in front of him. And so for myself, at the young age of 3 years old, I was on a ladder on a slide, climbing up onto a slide, and I completely suffocated as a result of whooping cough. And so there's a lot of
Oh, God.
symbology and allegory to my name Jacob with biblical Jacob. But when you think of a ladder, you think of different rungs and different levels. And so from the earth to the heavens, the wisdom of Jacob's ladder just brings forward my near death experience, and it grounds it one ladder, one lesson at a time for this reality. And so what I walked into was not my fault, and it was, in many ways out of my control. But what I walked out of it became my life's work and what I was able to make sense of and the meaning behind it. And so that, really the wisdom Jacob's ladder is the meaning and the lessons behind my near death experience so that you don't have to wait till you die to really connect to heaven or to live in consciousness, but rather you could find ways to live that one rung at a time as you ascend and elevate within this lifetime itself.
Very interesting, that is. Um, about your clients, what's the common issues clients come to see you for then?
Well, I always like make a joke to myself where it's like you have a brain, you have a body. We could probably try to help you, and if I don't know how to help you, we try to find resources that might be better equipped than what I, could provide to your particular needs. But like I said, the wisdom of Jacob's ladder from the ground up. We really help out people from the psychological, mental health perspective. We help out people, who come to me for hypnotherapy. We do Reiki sessions, which Reiki, is a Japanese form of healing, and Rei stands for universal. Ki is energy. So all it does is align people with their own, flow or their universal life energy, and it gets people back into that. So I do that. I do a lot of mindfulness, as you said, for individuals and groups. So the key is we really try to have people to really tune in, get quiet, and open themselves up to maybe a different way of viewing their lives. And if you're coming from a different vantage point, the things you look at will change. And Wayne Dyer would say, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will always change. And so that's a part of it, is getting people to be more elevated so they could see things differently in their own lives at their own different levels.
Do you think a lot? I'm going to say a lot of religions have different ways we're coping with grief.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of approaches and belief systems that are carried over through cultures or religions. What I would preface is the value of belief systems. I always say beliefs aren't a thing; they are everything. And there's a close association with our beliefs and our outlooks and our behaviors. If you think God is, for instance, a vengeful, jealous, kind of chauvinistic, dogmatic being, then that's how you'll live your life. But if you, live in a reality where God is an all loving, all forgiving, and all knowing being, that then your life will be a lot different. So I think how people view God is significant in how they view their lives. For a lot of people, religions unfortunately has created a lot of fragments where somehow if you're born in a different set of family or different religion, you're in the VIP of God and everyone else is a nobody. So it can lead to um, just a lot of arrogance and just bypassing of other cultures or walks of life, and just pushing everyone else aside, and this kind of feeling of superiority in the eyes of God, which is the most ridiculous thing that could happen. And Bob, I had my near-death experience in, of all things, a playground. And to me, a playground symbolizes, a child playing in it. And what does that mean? Is that we're all children playing in God's playground as our brothers and sisters keeper. And so I believe in the no soul left behind notion that, we really want to make sure that this life doesn't just work for us, but works for all of us. And if we could make a small difference in the people around us in their lives, then wow, we are bringing, heaven down to earth, and we are living more in we consciousness in alignment with what God is, which is unification, the ultimate giver of life, and the ultimate provider of eternal life, and the ability to overcome even death itself.
When we talk about death, how many lives do we have? Do we come back one, two, three, four? And do we change ourselves into different religions, in fact?
Well, for instance, if I'm living in Montana, I could know what Montana is, but I'm not going to know what New York City is, right? I could, read books about it, I could learn about it, but until I'm in New York City, I really have no idea what that's like. That's just an example. So I think we come here in different cultures in lifetimes to just understand, different perspectives. It makes a more well-rounded, more universal person. There certainly could be karmic ties to living in different cultures, but it could lead to a more universality. And oftentimes, when you meet an old soul, it's kind of like meeting someone who's been to a lot of different cultures and countries, and no matter where they're placed, people could have a universal ability to relate to them. So I think really older souls are very well traveled, and they're able to speak a lot of different languages. There's a lot of memories there. And people who are younger souls tend to fall more into dogma, more so into being into their own box, my way or the highway, us versus them kind of thing. And they don't find an interest in expanding their horizons. They're more prone to having nationalistic identities versus
Mm.
universal identities. And that's been a big problem within. any type of world peace. I mean, right now the world has been here for thousands upon thousands of years, and yet look at the global scale, we're still doing a lot of the same behaviors on a great scale that haven't pivoted or changed. And so certainly there's been a lot of scientific and technological advancements, but in terms of the collective soul evolution, that is very far away from the scientific, which is leading itself to a lot of danger when the scientific evolution is outpacing the spiritual evolution on the planet.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I agree with you there as well. Um, what's passive regression?
Past life regression, yeah. Well, it can be quite passive too. So it's funny that you mentioned the word passive because it's very easy. It's very simple. Really, it's a form of hypnotherapy. Hypnosis really works with the higher minds, the higher subconscious, and just allows people to really get into those deeper states of awareness that goes beyond the conscious thoughts, the conscious mind. And so, I always say the mind can work much like a parachute. When it's open, it could work a lot better. And, when I had my near death experience, I saw that my brain was suffocated and shut down due to deprivation of oxygen. And this is congruent with near death experience research that will say that the brain does not create the mind, but the mind exists despite the brain. And so when the brain is a lot more relaxed, you're able to get into those deeper brainwave states, that's when your mind is a lot more open. And so hypnosis is really just a matter of first things first is letting go and just allowing yourself to be open to the power of suggestion. A lot of people think that it's a form of mind control, but to me, it's a mind liberation because you're not governed by your repetitive monkey mind or rapid thoughts, but you're able to really open yourself up into a much greater reality than your own current outlook. And that is what liberation means. It's an opening of awareness that goes beyond your own limitations. And so it's like that drawing from Plato when he spoke about of the allegory of the cave, where there were prisoners in the cave, and their reality was based off of the prisoners behind themselves and the shackles that were in. That's all that they saw. Once they broke out of the shackles, they got out of the cave and they saw a whole world that was right above them on this cave that was always there. And so past life regression is kind of like that too, where for many people, you're just kind of looking at reality through this box, then you open yourself up to a world that was always there, always will be there, always has been there, despite the limited reality that you're seeing in this lifetime. So it's just a gentle way of getting people to be in touch with other lifetimes and its significance with this current lifetime. Really.
Tell us about a bit about Jacob's awakening moment when you woke up.
Well, I think we're all awakened. The key is to be reawakened and to not be asleep while you're driving. But for myself, I did everything when you're a kid, what are you taught when you're a kid is you're taught the coolest thing you could do is to fit in, to be normal. That's what's prescribed to a lot of kids and certainly work with kids right now. And that's what I see is just to fit in. So having this near death experience, I was much different. And so I recognized that very quickly. And so there was a part of me that tried to bury this experience to fit in. But I just, no matter what I can do, I just knew no matter what I did, I was always going to be different. And so once I was able to really see that the coolest thing you could do is to be your unique self, was when I was able to take ownership of this. And that happened in my later teens when I was able to take my near death experience, which was felt like more of a burden than anything else, to see it as more of a blessing and a gift. But it wasn't until I saw that it was bigger than me, that it wasn't just about me, was when that burden became a sense of purpose. That pain became a sense of purpose. And I think if there's one thing to take, is that life is not just about you. It's about utilizing your experiences for the greater collective whole. And we all go through experiences so that we could really expand ourselves and we could tap in and lean into our purpose, because pain could be a great fuel for our purpose. We recognize the greater collective impact that our own experiences could have on someone that we encounter.
Tell us about your weekly podcast, The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. and
Yeah.
soul at a time. Tell us a little bit about what you talk about.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned at the right time because yeah, information is everything, and the majority of people right now they're getting their information from a lot of the wrong sources, and they're being enslaved rather than being formed with current events going on. And so the wisdom of Jacob's ladder, is a great way to bring out some healing information, information that could help move the needle in one's life. And so we bring on different experts in the mental health field, different healers, different intuitives, stuff like that. And they're all just able to kind of give over their own personal story, tools, insights. And just I've gotten a lot of nice feedback that it has helped out people to navigate their everyday life. And so you could vent of the world events and you could say, wow, things are terrible, they're out of my control, I'm powerless. Or you could recognize that, there's a quote that says, yesterday I was, I was, I guess smart, so I decided to try to change the world. And then the other part of the quote is, yes, today I am wise, and I recognize that I needed to change myself. And so I think if more people are able to change themselves and focus on that, that's the greater change that we could see in the collective.
I know you've got to get off to work as well. A couple of quick questions. Jacob, what do you think of therapy of stimulations, lifetimes?
Yeah, I certainly feel that that's very real. I've spoken to a lot of evidential mediums, and certainly I experienced this in my near-death experience, where I firmly believe that where we are in this body is probably 15% of our full self. And I think there's a higher dimensional part of ourself that goes just beyond this body. So I think each and every one of us, yes, are probably connected to other lifetimes at the same time, but we're also connected to the other side. And many times when we sleep, we'll have dreams of mountains and landscapes and just other experiences. And so, we're on this earth, but we're not of this earth, if that makes sense. And we're all knowingly or unknowingly connected to a much greater reality and time than what we're privy to. So yeah, this is a lot more. But I would say, for practicality standpoint, it's very important to be grounded, because if I were to say, hey, I'm going to play the radio right now and I'm going to blast every single station at the same time, you'd go crazy. And so I think it's very important to kind of stick with, one station on the radio, which is this life, this body. If we were meant to be there, we would, but we came into this body for a reason, which is to be the manifestation of the light here on earth and to bring down that piece of heaven down on earth. And so we're here for a reason, but it could help to recharge ourselves to give this life just more rejuvenation and a greater just inspirational feel if we're connected to a higher reality.
One quick question before you go. Was Star was going to ask you if there are many copies of us living in different dimensions at the same time.
Yeah, that's been very chronicled, and people who do hypnosis are able to find that clients have a lot more connectivity to other places and times that they did not know of that are going on at the same time. But I would suggest, just for sanity standpoint, is to be as grounded as we could with our feet in the ground, but as needed to have our minds open up to the heavens. But being grounded in this body is very important. It's how we make the most of this life. And this life is our afterlife. How we live is how we die many times. And so what we will do in this lifetime will continue within that lifetime. So if you like fishing, you'll go fishing. If you like, playing baseball, you'll be playing baseball. Our enthusiasms and our passions are hereafter.
Oh, thank you, JP. I know, got to tell the listeners, but Jacob's got to go off to work now and do a shift at the
Yeah,
hospital,
yeah.
doing therapies and everything. And so he's got to go, unfortunately. I know everybody's enjoying it at the moment. We'll probably get him back on later in the year, and maybe start a little bit earlier, or when it's a day off, when he can come on.
Yeah. Well, it was a pleasure reconnecting with you, Bob. Thank you for your great work. Like you said, you've been doing this for a decade now and plus. So, you're making a tremendous impact, you did too on humanity and bring forward, tremendous information that people
Thank
really
you.
need to hear. So it was a pleasure. And if anyone wants to get in touch with me,
Yeah.
please go on my website, jacobLcooper.com. That's jacobLcooper.com. I have in-person service, remote services. You can check out events as well as my 2 books, which are available Amazon worldwide. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I'll let you get off, buddy. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Everybody's enjoyed it. Everybody in the chat room, as always.
Okay.
The Star, Joanne, Steph, Joanne, Diane, Star. There's many more in the chat room.
Yeah.
So thank you again. My guest on Friday, the 12th, is Daryl Denton. He does a lot of Bigfoot events with Martin Grooves and Ron Moed. They go on expeditions all over America and the world. So Daryl is on it this Friday at 7 o'clock UK time, 2 o'clock Eastern, and I think now 11 o'clock Pacific.
All right.
I would
Thank
say good night and God bless. I hope you have a nice shift work.
Thank you.
Not too stressful.
No, and I'm going to Lilydale tomorrow, which if you're familiar with Lilydale, it's a center for spiritualism here
Oh,
in the
lovely.
US, and it's a place where evidential mediums live, and it's been around for hundreds of years. So I'm going to be doing a weekend workshop in historic Lilydale, New York, right outside of Buffalo, New York. So the Center for
Oh,
Spiritualism. Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
great. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. I'll talk
Thank
soon.
you. Yeah, bye.
Be well.
Talk soon. Bye.